today we have Sarah Sundin joining us, and it is seriously so fun to have you here. So just tell us just a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what life is like in Southern California. You know, it's just terrible. I'm sure. What brings you joy, what you've been thinking about, all those things.
Well, I write historical fiction set during World War II. I recently moved from Northern California to Southern California just this past summer with my husband. The reason we moved down here is our 3 adult children are down in Southern California. And our brand new grandson, who was born on December 18th. So he's just a wee little, he's only 6 pounds of cuteness.
Oh, yes.
But he's our first one. So it's been just so much fun. And what brings me joy, it's been fun getting to know my new community. I'm getting involved with a new church, a new Bible study group, and exploring the neighborhood. We have 2 dogs who love to walk, and we love to walk. So we've been doing a lot of walking, but it's great for on so many different levels. Just getting out, getting to know the community, but also clearing my head, exercising the body, communing with God and nature. So it's my walk is one of my favorite parts of my.
So fun too to get to celebrate new grandbaby, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
When also, just for those who do not know, Sarah, you are the best-selling author and Christy Award winner of several novels, including When Twilight Breaks, Until Leaves Fall in Paris, which is one of my favorites, and the popular World War II series Sunrise at Normandy. So today we're going to talk about your newest book, The Sound of Light, which has released this month. So congratulations on this. But before we talk all about it, I really am curious. Did you foresee all of this coming? Did you always want to be an author? What?
No, this is completely a God thing. I was a good little girl who loved to read, and my sister too. We're only a year apart, and so we just read everything together. And like all little girls who love to read, we fancied ourselves future authoresses. But we're also, my family's very practical. My dad's an engineer, and I knew becoming an author was about as likely as becoming a ballerina. And I did take ballet. I knew I was never going to become a ballerina. So I just kind of relegated all that in the same category as, cute dreams, but not happening. And I also love science. So I majored in chemistry and I became a pharmacist, and I love pharmacy. It was a great job for a stay-at-home mom because I could work 1 day a week and my professional brain and have all this time home with the kids. And I thought I had the perfect life, and I was planning to increase my hours as the children got older. And then once they were empty, I was an empty nester, I could go full-time. And God had another idea. And when my youngest son was 1.5 years old, God gave me this, I woke up from a dream with this story idea. And I've never had it happen before or since, but it was just so present and so real and so compelling that I had to write it down. And so I literally started grabbing my kids, lined notebook paper and a number 2 pencil.
Whatever you had around the house.
Yeah, so I had it around the house, and I started writing, and it felt so weird. I was too embarrassed to anybody for the longest time. And I'm a pharmacist. What is this writing a story thing? And I kind of wrote it stream of consciousness for about 6 months. It was a horrifying thing that will never be published. It should never be published. But then I had another story idea, and then another, and it was as if I say on that day that I had that first dream, it was as if God flipped a switch in my brain and said, "You are now a writer." And it was very disorienting, slightly scary, definitely weird, and it took me 10 years to get published, which is actually not that abnormal. I think the average is 7, so I'm just a little behind the curve there. I was also writing, it's hard to believe now because World War II fiction is so popular, but 15 years ago, it was not popular. And all the editors and agents were saying, we don't want historicals, and we definitely don't want World War II. So I kept hearing that over and over again. And then I was hearing they liked my story, but not the genre. And finally, the market flipped around 2008, 2009, and they wanted historical and they were willing to take a chance on World War II. And now it's a huge genre. So I just kind of, for the first time in my life, I'm trendy. I've never been trendy.
Stumbled into the trend, but
I did. And I just, and my agent and my editor are thrilled because I was writing World War II before the trend, hit full wave. So I was already established. So I was in a good position as opposed to trying to get on the World War II bandwagon now, to be kind of late in the game. So it was purely God thing, pushing me, shoving me, sometimes kicking, screaming, definitely whining, a lot of whining.
Yeah.
But there was this passion for the stories, and a passion. I really became passionate about the World War II era, and that got me through all the whininess.
Yeah. Well, and I want to touch on that a little bit because, your stories, the first one that I've read was Until the Leaves Fall in Paris. And, just transparently, like I kind of stumbled upon it because I read a lot of Christian living nonfiction books, but I don't read a ton of novels myself. But at this particular time, I'd been writing a lot, and I was just like, I just want to get lost in a story. And I love stories that are kind of based on real life events. I do like World War II stories, documentaries, films, all that kind of thing. And so I came across yours, and I was like, ooh, this looks like it could be good. And then just the first first chapter, I was like, yes, this is going to be a good story. But in all of your work, there's, themes of selflessness and sacrifice and even romance. And so it is clear that your heart is drawn to World War II. And like you said, even before it was popular. And so why is this?
It started with family stories. My grandfather was a pharmacist mate in the Navy, which was a medic. I don't know why they call him pharmacist mate. It was kind of funny when I ended up being a pharmacist, but they actually don't perform pharmacy, but they were the medics. So I grew up hearing his stories, and I didn't realize this at the time, but that was unusual. Most men, when they came home from the war, they dealt with it by not talking about it. But my grandfather dealt with it by telling stories. And he was a natural storyteller. He could tell the corniest joke and have everybody in the room cracking up. An incredible man. And his brother, who was also a storyteller, was a B-17 bomber pilot. And boy, did he was a character, and he had stories. And I also grew up hearing about my grandmothers on the U.S. home front. So it was kind of the stories I was wrapped around with. My parents are avid readers, and my mom has to talk about every book she reads, so I grew up hearing, it was almost like I was reading twice. I was reading what I was reading, plus I was hearing what she was reading. Yeah. She liked a lot of historical fiction, a lot of nonfiction about, also, she reads so widely, just incredible amount of stuff she reads. So I heard a lot of World War II stories from her too. And I just kind of sank there in the subconscious. And when, the first book I had the idea for is actually a contemporary novel. And the second book I also wrote was a contemporary. But at that time I had an idea I had a story idea, and I realized it wouldn't work in a contemporary setting because basically it would have been solved with a Google search. Like, well, that's not a story. It's not
right.
But I realized it would work in a historical setting. And I thought to myself, World War II will be easy because it wasn't that long ago. And my grandparents lived through it. And I got an A in high school history.
Yeah.
I was naive, and I'm really glad I was, because if I'd known how much research I have to do with each, I would not have started. Yeah. But once I got into the research, I found I love research. It's a really good fit for me. Once again, I have a scientific training, so I really like details and analysis. So that kind of, and searching for the right detail, I'm really doggedly determined. So I will just keep going till I find the detail that I'm looking for. So that fits really well with historical fiction writing. And you can't just I'll make it up as I go. Like, well, no, because it was an actual place and an actual time, and there were actual people living there. I don't want to just make it up off the top of my head. I want to be as right as I can.
Mm-hmm. No, and I mean, you see that when you're reading, you see the attention to detail that you poured into it. And I am so excited about this new book. Three reasons really. Like, one, just your story, the storytelling. I know it's going to be really good. And then two, it's a rowing tale, and I enjoy rowing and kayaking. So when I found that, I was like, ooh, that'll be fun.
Oh yeah, I might have, you may find details in there that might not be quite right because I'm not a rower, but I try to.
I mean, I row for fun, not like collegiate or anything. I grew up in West Texas, so there was no water. And now Oklahoma City, we have a little bit of water, so I can do it. But
my editor and I kept, I mean, the fact that you row backwards, and I kept picturing Henrik rowing facing where he was going. Like, no, he's backward. It's like, okay, so which end of the boat is there? Which end of the boat? So in the final edit, we're like, okay, he's facing this way. The boat is that way. He's back. And really had to think that through a little more than I should have.
Well, I'm excited to read it. So excited. And also because your story, this one in particular, focuses on the ordinary people who make extraordinary decisions. And, right now on the podcast, we are in mini series on paying attention. And so, like you said, like all the details that you've poured into your work, I mean, the awards can attest for all the success and the work and the research. And it's just really cool to see how God, no experience that you had was left unused. Like God used each experience to lead you to what he needs you to do now.
Exactly.
And so can you just give us a little bit of a summary of The Sound of Light, just so everyone can follow along with us?
Okay, I have to show off the boxes.
Woo! Yeah!
I can't even tell you how pretty it is in public. You can maybe see it kind of, the letters are kind of shimmering and they're raised, and it's just so pretty. So I'm just really in love with it. Yeah. But the novel is set in Denmark in World War II, which was an interesting setting, and not one you see a lot in fiction. But it was a small nation, but there were some big stories that came out of Denmark in the war. And Henrik Elefelt is a baron. He lives a playboy lifestyle, but when the Nazis invade, he suddenly becomes ashamed of his life, and he wants something new. And he is an Olympic rower, and his friend needs to, because he's opposed the Nazis before the invasion. So Henrik rows his friend across to Sweden. It's only 10 miles. I can say that. I wouldn't be able to row it. So he rows his friend across, and then his friend wants to get involved with this growing resistance effort. So he recruits Henrik into becoming a courier, basically, and picking up messages for the resistance to carry across to Sweden, where the heads of the Danish resistance were really meeting, because they could work with the allies in England. The Sweden was neutral. So anyway, so Henrik, because he's well known and because he was an Olympic rower, he has to kind of go underground. So he takes on this secret identity as Hemming Andersen, who is a humble shipyard worker. And so he grows his long beard, and he he barely talks because he doesn't want to, if he speaks too much, he'll reveal his upper crust background. Basically plays not very bright. And this is really humbling experience for him, but it's something he wants to do for what he needs to do. So meanwhile, Elsa Jensen is an American physicist, a nuclear physicist who is studying at the Institute of Theoretical Physics in Copenhagen, run by Niels Bohr, who's a real man, a Nobel laureate. So as a chemistry major, I was really thrilled to hear Niels Bohr. And he was half Jewish, so that figures into the story too. But as Elsa's the type of person, she's very focused on her goal. She wants to do a really great job in theoretical physics, and she's studying light. And obviously, like all physicists, she wants that Nobel Prize someday. So she doesn't dare give up this position. She doesn't dare go home. She will stay in Copenhagen during the occupation. Yeah. But her best friend ropes her into using the mimeograph to print resistance newspapers, which is obviously a very dangerous thing to do. Mm-hmm. Henrik ends up moving into the same boarding house as Elsa. And once again, he has to kind of play dumb. And here he is living with this theoretical physicist. And she finds herself drawn to him. And meanwhile, he can't talk to her openly because he would reveal his position. And so there's this tension between her identity. And so it was a fun little romance, because she's working with her biases and her prejudices, and he's trying to conceal his identity. And it was a super fun romance to